Genesis 21 1-7, And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. Then Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, God has made me laugh, and all who hear will laugh with me. She also said, Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? For I have borne him a son in his old age.
In these verses, we see the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham and Sarah. Despite their advanced age, Sarah conceives and gives birth to a son, who they name Isaac. This event, occurring exactly when God had said it would, underlines God's faithfulness to his word. Abraham marks Isaac as part of the covenant through circumcision, following God's command. Sarah's joy is palpable as she reflects on the miraculous birth of her son, which brings laughter and amazement to those who hear about it.
Genesis 21 8-14, So the child grew and was weaned. And Abraham made a great feast on the same day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, scoffing. Therefore she said to Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, namely with Isaac. And the matter was very displeasing in Abraham's sight because of his son. But God said to Abraham, Do not let it be displeasing in your sight because of the lad or because of your bondwoman. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Isaac your seed shall be called. Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman, because he is your seed. So Abraham rose early in the morning, and took bread and a skin of water, and putting it on her shoulder, he gave it and the boy to Hagar, and sent her away. Then she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba.
The joy of Isaac's birth and early years is marred by strife within Abraham's family. Sarah sees Ishmael, Abraham and Hagar's son, mocking during the feast for Isaac, leading her to demand that Hagar and Ishmael be sent away. This request distresses Abraham greatly, but God reassures him, promising that he will make a nation of Ishmael as well, because he too is Abraham's offspring. Following God's advice, Abraham sends Hagar and Ishmael away, who then wander in the wilderness. In this passage, we see complex family dynamics, faith tested in times of conflict, and God's reassurance in moments of distress. God's promises remain firm even amidst turmoil and change.
Genesis 21:15-21, When the water in the skin was used up, she placed the boy under one of the shrubs. Then she went and sat down across from him at a distance of about a bowshot, for she said to herself, Let me not see the death of the boy. So she sat opposite him, and lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad. Then the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven, and said to her, What ails you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the skin with water, and gave the lad a drink. So God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness, and became an archer. He dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt.
This portion of the story follows Hagar and Ishmael after they have been sent away by Abraham. Their situation becomes desperate when their water runs out in the wilderness of Beersheba. Hagar, not wanting to witness the death of her son, leaves him under a shrub and moves away. In her desperation and sorrow, Hagar weeps, but it is the voice of Ishmael that God hears. He sends an angel to reassure Hagar, renewing the promise that he will make a great nation from Ishmael. God then opens Hagar's eyes to see a well, from which she is able to draw water to save herself and her son. God's presence remains with Ishmael as he grows up in the wilderness, becomes an archer, and eventually marries a woman from Egypt. This passage reminds us that even in moments of deep despair and seeming abandonment, God's care and provision are there, fulfilling his promises in ways that may be unexpected. It also points to God's concern for all of humanity, including those who seem to be on the periphery of the main biblical narrative.
Genesis 21:22-34, And it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore, swear to me by God that you will not deal falsely with me, with my offspring, or with my posterity, but that according to the kindness that I have done to you, you will do to me and to the land in which you have dwelt. And Abraham said, I will swear. Then Abraham rebuked Abimelech because of a well of water which Abimelech's servants had seized. And Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing, you did not tell me, nor had I heard of it until today. So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. Then Abimelech asked Abraham, What is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs which you have set by themselves? And he said, You will take these 7 ewe lambs from my hand, that they may be my witness that I have dug this well. Therefore he called that place Beersheba, because the two of them swore an oath there. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. So Abimelech rose with Phicol, the commander of his army, and they returned to the land of the Philistines. Then Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham stayed in the land of the Philistines many days.
This passage turns the narrative spotlight back to Abraham, who is settled in the land of the Philistines. The king, Abimelech, along with his army commander Phicol, acknowledge that God's favor is with Abraham, and they seek a treaty with him, asking Abraham to deal kindly with them as they have with him. Abraham agrees, but not before raising a complaint about a well that Abimelech's servants had seized. This issue is resolved by a covenant agreement, marked by the exchange of sheep and oxen, and the setting aside of 7 ewe lambs as a testimony that Abraham had dug the well in question. The place is named Beersheba, signifying the oath taken there. Abraham also plants a tamarisk tree as a marker of the covenant and worships God there. This passage underscores the importance of treaties and covenants as a means of maintaining peace, resolving disputes, and promoting mutual respect among different peoples. It also speaks to the recognition of God's presence and blessing in Abraham's life by those outside his immediate family and group.
Genesis 22 1-6. Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham, and said to him, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and he split the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey, the lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you. So Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand, and a knife, and the 2 of them went together.
In this crucial part of the Abraham story, God tests Abraham in a dramatic and troubling way. He commands Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac as a burnt offering. This request is challenging not just because of the love Abraham has for Isaac, but also because Isaac is the child through whom God has promised to make Abraham a great nation. Nevertheless, Abraham demonstrates remarkable obedience. He prepares for the sacrifice and sets off for the designated place with Isaac. Notice how Abraham tells his servants that he and Isaac will go to worship and then return, perhaps a sign of his faith in God's promise, despite the circumstances.
Genesis 22 7-14. But Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, My father. And he said, Here I am, my son. Then he said, Look, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering. So the 2 of them went together. Then they came to the place of which God had told him. And Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order, and he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar, upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. So he said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the lad, or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Then Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up for a burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of the place, "The Lord will provide," as it is said to this day, "In the mount of the Lord it shall be provided."
The tension of the story peaks as Isaac questions the absence of a lamb for the offering, and Abraham replies with prophetic faith that God will provide. At the moment when Abraham is about to carry out the sacrifice, an angel intervenes, stopping him and affirming that he has passed the test. A ram, caught in a thicket, is provided as a substitute for Isaac. Abraham names the place "the Lord will provide," a testament to God's faithfulness and provision in the most desperate circumstances.
Genesis 22:15-19. Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time out of heaven, and said, "By myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this thing, and have not withheld your son, your only son, blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven and as the sand which is on the seashore, and your descendants shall possess the gate of their enemies. In your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." So Abraham returned to his young men, and they rose and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt at Beersheba.
Following the test, God reaffirms his covenant with Abraham, promising that his descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. The reaffirmation of this promise at this particular moment underlines the significance of the test and Abraham's obedience. The promise is not only for abundance but also victory. His descendants shall possess the gate of their enemies. Furthermore, all nations of the earth will be blessed through Abraham's seed. This passage solidifies the covenant made earlier, intertwining it with Abraham's act of faith and obedience.
Genesis 22:20-24. Now it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, "Indeed Milcah also has borne children to your brother Nahor, Huz his firstborn, Buz his brother, Kemuel the father of Aram, Chest, Hazo, Pildash, Jigloth, and Bethuel. And Bethuel begot Rebekah. These 8 Milcah bore to Nahor, Abraham's brother. His concubine, whose name was Reumah, also bore Tebah, Gam, Thahash, and Makkah."
The final verses of Genesis 22 switch focus from Abraham and Isaac to news about Abraham's brother, Nahor, and his family. The mention of Rebekah here foreshadows her future importance as Isaac's wife. By naming these relatives, the author not only provides a sense of familial context but also sets the stage for future narratives. As we move forward in the book of Genesis, the significance of these family connections will become more apparent.